Welcome to everybody to this new i4Kids training capsule, which is going to be focused on Federated access to hospital data for research and innovation through PHDS. We are so happy to have you here once again. So as we also usually do, just some indications just to follow up this training capsule. It's going to last like about 45 minutes. This session is going to be recorded, so we really ask you as well just to mute your microphones during the session. But on the other hand, we encourage you just to let your switch on your camera just to be with us during this session. And once in the following days, we will also publish this training capsule in our YouTube channel, where you can find all the sessions that we have already shared during this last year. And please, you can also use the chat for any request or question that you may have during the conversation and during the session. Just before starting, just a couple of messages that we would like to share with you. Pekka, it's going to also explain to you what we're going to do in Helsinki in September, but just to remind that we are going to hold the Pediatric Innovation Day with HUS Hospital is going to be our host. And so the registration is open. You can access through the QR code, and we would really be happy if you can join us in Helsinki in September. And then we also want to take advantage just to announce that next week we're opening the call for startups in pediatrics and maternal health that would like to attend and to pitch at the second Pediatric Investment Forum that we're going to launch on Monday. So if you are a startup looking for fundraising and you're interested in pitching in front of investors from Europe and other parts of the world, we really encourage you just to apply to this call. That details are going to be published on Monday. So yes, now with this introduction already done, I really want to introduce our speaker today, which is Pekka Kahri, and he is a development manager in the HUS Helsinki University Hospital. And so we are really, really happy to have him just to speak about the topic that we already have announced. So Pekka, please, you can introduce yourself and also the PHEMS project, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patricia. Good afternoon, everybody. On my behalf, greetings from Helsinki. It's typical weather for the May first week, so it was +1 degrees this morning, and yesterday we had a short shower of slush coming from the sky. But spring is coming also up here, and in September, Helsinki is a fine place to visit, so warm welcome here then. So today's topic is about federated data access, and my talk will be based on the work that we are doing in a project called PHEMS, and that's why all the slides that I'm sharing are also in the PHEMS background. I have a technical education myself, but I'm mostly working in administrative and leadership and coordination work now for 7 years in the Helsinki University Hospital, which is a big public hospital in southern Finland. And I have been leading some EU initiatives, and my heart is very much with the pediatrics world, because it really has a purpose, and we have an excellent collaboration networks across Europe, where i4Kids is one example and the PHEMS project is another example. So very happy to talk about this topic in this arena. The contents of my talk, so I'm just first setting the scene a little bit about talking on when we want to collaborate and use sensitive health data for research and innovation or for other purposes. How can we improve the chances of doing this also cross-border? In many of our countries, we're quite okay with working with patient data locally or regionally or in a national context. But when we want to go then beyond our national borders, this is super difficult. And of course, one of the approaches is then the federated data access and federated data analytics. Then I will briefly introduce the PHEMS project. So what's the background? What are we trying to do? Where are we at? And then start revisiting or visiting the topic of today's talk. So what is federated data analytics? What does federated access mean? What kind of real-world use cases can be done with a federated data access? And how are we aiming to develop and foster those in a concept what we call the pediatric health data space for Europe. And then a few words to conclude, since the Europe is also aligning itself for the secondary use and access for health data through the European Health Data Space regulation. So I will just say a few words about this regulation and how does it relate to federated analytics. And with this, then hopefully we have some time for Q&A and discussion at the end of the session. So if we start with the first part, how to improve collaboration on sensitive health data when we go cross-border. If we think about working in projects or setting up projects that use patient data, it is difficult. There is lots of regulation, privacy legislation, which is to some extent common European, but there are also national regulations on top of it, and then there are of course some quite significant differences in how we apply these rules and regulations in different countries. So this is really a challenge, especially when we then start talking about multilateral collaboration between organizations from different countries. The background for this, of course, is that sensitive personal data is, as it says, it's sensitive and it's personal, and processing this data and also releasing it from the data controllers environment is highly restricted, and it's highly restricted for a good reason, because these are sensitive, and especially when we talk about pediatrics, so where we have a vulnerable patient group, so minors who are often seriously ill and they are looking for a treatment. So there is good grounds for limiting the use of personal data. But on the other hand, as there are seriously ill minors who would need and would benefit from all help that medicine or healthcare can provide, we can ask the question that is sometimes these restrictions in fact hampering or making their treatment more difficult. But I think that the basic idea that sensitive personal data should be protected, that there is a good grounds for that, and we should not abandon this core value. Then when we go for applying for access to data or access permits, we find that organizational policies are very different. This can be even within a country or within a region. So one hospital or one data holder is very comfortable in sharing data for some purpose or for some types of organizations, and others might be very restrictive. So it is fragmented. It is variable between regions or organizations, even within a region, not to talk about different countries. This makes, in fact, that when we plan and launch new research projects that want to use data, the process becomes very heavy, means that we have to go through a lot of paperwork every single time for a project. And this means that if we have a relatively small project in a way, meaning that the patient group is small, we're asking maybe preliminary research questions, feasibility, characterizing a disease or a patient group. Setting up these projects will be very difficult because we don't have the massive resources to mobilize support for all types of administrative needs that setting these projects up would require. And then when we get on a project up and running and have done all this work and have set up the IT solutions, so it can happen that this is just for the one project, and when the project is over, so everything is sort of disintegrating. And this makes it very difficult to continuously do collaboration cross-border between different organizations. And I think that this is just to set the scene about why do we want to talk about federated access to hospital data. Maybe this is also familiar to everybody, but it's a good background to think about. Then personally, I think that we cannot solve this with any single solution. There is not a silver bullet that we would make it very easy to set up projects that are wanting to use data, but we want to and should be applying several measures to make it easier, make it less sensitive. For example, by applying privacy-enhancing technologies, anonymizing or pseudo-anonymizing the data, or generating synthetic data sets. We should be more concerned about federated analytics, which means that the data stays put at data sources, and only the analytical results and analytical code will travel around. And this calls for harmonization and standardization of data. But this could be one strategy to make progress. We should bring common structures to decisions on data permits and access. And I think that here European health data space will make a major contribution, but it will take some time, maybe 5 to 10 years before it's widely used in Europe. And then, of course, there's a way to engage with large European initiatives on data collaboration. One is Darwin EU, launched and maintained by the Medicines Agency on collecting real-world evidence on medication use, or EDEN, the European Health Data Evidence Network, which is large-scale initiative trying to take these things forward. So there are a set of strategies that we need to make progress. And one of the approaches that we have taken is to build a project which we call PHEMS. And PHEMS project was started from the common need between pediatric hospitals that there is urgency in finding solutions for data sharing. For pediatric centers, especially those who are specialized in the most demanding pediatric care, all patient groups are basically small in numbers. They are often quite complex or rare diseases. So it means that there are just a few patients, maybe even in a larger center of a kind. So that's where we cannot then conduct any scientific research with sufficient statistical power. On the other hand, for children and especially genetically inherited diseases, there are new therapies that are made available by the industry, and they are often quite powerful, but they are also extremely expensive. And the methodology for assessing the real-world effectiveness of these new therapies through data is currently not possible, because the data accumulates too slowly, even in big centers where there are not much individual patients. So we need to somehow go beyond our own center and our own country. Then if we want to engage with medtech industry and innovation ecosystems who are developing these data-hungry applications like machine learning models or other artificial intelligence solutions. So we need larger data sets in order to make these models valid and also useful beyond the environment where they are developed. And then a very basic need for pediatric hospitals is that since many of the most demanding procedures are often centralized in 1 or 2 or 3 hospitals in a country. In northern countries, for example, where we are small in population, so there might be that there's one tertiary pediatric center in the entire country. Then there is no way to do benchmarking and learning with with our other institutions on the most demanding and complex patients. So this is why in pediatrics there is an urgency in making this data collaboration happen, and PHEMS was put together to trying to solve this challenge in pediatrics, funded by the European Union Horizon Europe program and the UK Research and Innovation Agency. So we have a consortium consisting of 6 hospitals, San Juan de Deu Hospital being one of the partners, HUS in Helsinki coordinating this activity, Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, Erasmus Medical Center, Sofia Children's Hospital, Mayer Hospital in Florence, and Riga Children's Hospital in Latvia. And then a group of companies and technology providers who work together in making this pediatric data collaboration a reality so that we can create what we call a data space for pediatrics, pediatric health data space, or PHDS. And this would help in meeting the challenges that we are finding in pediatrics. To see the sustainability and expansion of this activity, we are working closely together with the European Children's Hospitals Organization, or ECHO, who has even a wider group of member hospitals in almost every European country. Currently 16 centers and more joining constantly. So this is a platform where we are building this federated pediatric health data space to grow, and we even want to grow beyond to make this a European-wide solution for data access in pediatrics. When we started the PHEMS project, so we wanted to emphasize a few things. Of course, that it's driven by pediatrics, it's very collaborative, we want to scale, and we want to be compliant, which is of course a mandatory requirement. But few things that I want to bring forward. One is the question of privacy, and this is where we are talking about what we're talking about today, how to make privacy by design solutions by using federated analytics without the need to transfer sensitive patient data around. Then we want to make sure that the hospitals as data holders, those who have responsibility over the data, that they remain in control. So the control is not sourced out to some commercial party or to some external coordination hub, but the hospitals themselves, they retain the control over the policies and basic decisions on data access, but we want to harmonize and streamline these. And then also to make this efficient in a way that we can also serve these pediatric patient groups that are very small in numbers, which results that there are also very few clinicians, very few researchers and clinical teams working with these patients in each of the hospitals. So we have to be efficient. The PHEMS project is working with 3 clinical use cases, which demonstrates the impact and serve as model use cases for further exploitation. First is a benchmarking use case where we want to compare numbers and outcomes of pediatric cardiac surgery operations between 4 hospitals, where we are then collecting standardized data and displaying it over a dashboard in order to learn from the best and make improvement both in patient outcomes and also safety and quality of care. Great Ormond Street Hospital is leading this use case. Then there is 2 use cases which focus more on algorithm or analytical methodology development. Sepsis in pediatric intensive care units is a serious medical condition, and San Juan de Deu Children's Hospital is leading the development of a predictive algorithm which could predict the onset of sepsis in a pediatric intensive care unit setting. And then a third use case is led by Erasmus Medical Center in Rotterdam, focusing on a rare disease patient group. So these three clinical use cases are there to test and validate that the idea of a data space as we are creating it can work. So this was briefly about PHEMS, the project, the context where we're working on. And now let's talk a little bit about the today's topic, federated data analytics or federated data access. What does it mean? So very simply and on a very high level, if we talk about data, how to access and analyze data. So a traditional way of doing it is that the data user who has some sort of a workspace in its use asks for access to a database, and then the individual level data is then transferred to the workspace where the data users can then access and process the individual level data. So this is the traditional way of working, giving the data users a direct access over individual level data in a workspace. If with this method you want to do data analysis, including data from multiple databases, from each database, the data would be transferred to the workspace, combined, and then the data analytics could happen in a single workspace. This is the traditional way of working, and it has been quite business as usual and powerful, especially in some parts of the world, before the privacy concerns and data rights became a topic. And then we see that this contains some risks for transferring individual level data, and then compliance and regulation is very restrictive for this mode of operation, but very powerful if you are allowed to do it. Then what does it mean to do a federated data analytics? The idea is that data never leaves, the individual level data never leaves the hospital, but the data user develops an analytical code, transmits it with some mechanism to the hospital. The hospital is running locally the analytical code against their patient data database, and then only the analytical results are returned to the workspace that the data user is using, and then the data user can make draw insights from the results. And if this is done with the multiple centers, so this would mean that the code is sent to each of the hospitals. Processing would happen locally, and then aggregated results would be returned and then combined in the secure workspace for insights. So this is what we mean on a very high level when we talk about federated analytics. If we then look at what is the prerequisite that federated analytics works in multiple data sources settings, the prerequisite is that the data has to be somehow harmonized. If the data is not harmonized, so the code that is developed and used for doing the analysis, it would have to be different for every single database that is used. So if we want to use one set of analytical code and run it on all the hospitals or all the data sources, the data must be harmonized. Harmonized means that it must be structured in a similar way in a database so that the analytical code can be executed there and the results that are returned make some sense. They represent real insights, real results displaying the database. So it's really, really key for effectively using any type of multiple data sources that are distributed. And here standards are very good. So if there is a standard and you need multiple, so standards is an excellent solution, and fortunately there is an emerging standard or de facto standard for observational research, which is called OMOP. OMOP comes from the word Observational Medical Outcomes Partnership, developed the data model originally in the US and then continued in the global community, which is becoming or has become the de facto standard for harmonizing data for these types of analytical purposes. It's also not only the data model, so how the database is set up, but it's also a standardized framework for doing analytics and ensuring consistency and clarity across the different data sources. If we compare a little bit what is the advantages of the federated approach and what are the advantages of the centralized approach, so the where you can collect data together. So first looking at the federated part, so first of all, it's privacy by design. The data user never gets their hands on the real patient level, real sensitive data. Only the aggregates are being shared, and these are by definition anonymous. You don't have to transfer the patient level data. That means that the approval process is easier. It's often much faster. Data controllers and privacy people are very much more relaxed with this idea of federation than for releasing individual level, even pseudo-anonymized data sets. You could say that federated approach scales better because you can include more data with the same concept going cross-organization. You can go even cross-border or even to a global setting. Also, data can scale up. The selection of variables that is done in a project can be updated more easily, and also the cohort can be updated more easily. And then as we are tapping to the hospital data sources, this is a real life patients, so it is not a biased or selected group of study subjects or some registry cohorts. This can also be in fact a disadvantage because this real life based means that the data can be more diverse and maybe of lesser quality. And then very powerful part of federated analytics is that it can be automated. So once the analysis is done successfully over several data sources, you could repeat it, for example, every month or every 6 months or every year. And this generates a very powerful tool for repeated analysis, which are useful, for example, in benchmarking or maybe some monitoring type of needs. But bearing in mind that centralized approach also has some advantages. So federated access is by no means a perfect solution. Centralized analytics is still a golden standard for evidence generation. So if you need very reliable evidence, for example, for the regulator, it's often mandatory to at least to some extent have a centralized data set for analysis at your disposal. The data can be very well curated and of very high quality consequently, and importantly, the research team can themselves directly assess the data quality because they have the individual level data which they can themselves view and process. For a federated approach, the data user team never sees the actual individual level data. They only can see the results and of course the structure of the database and the characteristics of the database. There is very wide and established statistical methodology available for a centralized approach and tools, and also infrastructures are available. So these types of secure processing environments are well established, they are available, they are audited, very secure. Regulators are very comfortable with these, and it can be also computationally quite economical. So both have advantages, the main difference is that if you cannot do centralized approach, for example, cross-border, combining a data set from Finland, Germany, and Spain into one database, it can be very, very difficult. So if you can't do that, then the federated approach might be a good alternative. Then if we look at a pediatric health data space, so how we are planning that this would work. So a federated study or federated project, a research team has some sort of workspace where they can work with their project. And the first stage is that they find out what kind of data is available over a network of hospitals. And this can be done through a shared metadata or by doing feasibility queries, which then give the research team enough information about what kind of analytics I could do, how many patients, what kind of data is available for my analysis. Then there's a step of applying for the data permits so that there is a basis for accessing this data. And this we are aiming to have a gateway through the pediatric health data space where by filling a single form, the data permit application can then be channeled to the different hospitals for decision making of the data access by the hospitals themselves. The third step is then the federated data processing. The research team has created analytical code. They will in fact push it to the shared Git repository that is available for the project and generate a pull request. So that when there is a pull request, then the hospitals who have granted access will pull the code from the Git, execute it on their local database. And then the fourth step is to check that the results are okay, that there is no low counts or any unintentional leakage of sensitive information. And then these results are returned to the research team. So this is the high-level idea how a federated network for pediatrics works. And this is something that is set up. We have this operational. It is not yet at production level, but we have 4 hospitals, Helsinki, Rotterdam, London, and Barcelona, who have these components installed in their operative IT systems. They have an OMOP database and these shared services that are a gateway to the access are set up, and they are being tested at the moment in PHEMS project. Okay, then let's go to what can we do as real-world use cases in the pediatric health data space. And I have 4 very brief snapshots of examples. And we'll start with clinical benchmarking. So this is a topic that is interesting for hospitals, between hospitals that are treating same kinds of patients who can enter into national or international benchmarking, really to foster collaboration to improve the care for the benefit of patients. Measure quality and compare to the other similar peers or similar centers than yours to really identify where are we different from others, where is the best in class, where can there be performance gaps that we could try to improve, and the goal is that it's not for ranking, saying that we are the best or we are the second best, but it's really for improvement. And this is really something that makes sense, and there's also quite a bunch of scientific evidence and papers demonstrating that organizations who do systematic benchmarking, they do better in their work as treating their patients. With current benchmarking activities, there is a challenge that it requires quite high effort to retrieve the data from the electronic health records. Data quality issues and time and resources that this needs make it quite hard and quite cumbersome to work. But with the pediatric health data space, there is a process and now an emerging infrastructure where we can quite efficiently do new benchmarking studies. Form a team, define the use cases, go through the approvals, and then collect and standardize or harmonize the data, develop the analytical queries and dashboards, deploy them, and then continuously run the analysis and display them on dashboard and make clinical judgment out of those. Where are the potential points for improvement? And this slide will include a link to a full presentation about benchmarking, which is available on one of the PHEMS webinars. Okay, then the second potential use case is on supporting clinical research. So how to make a feasibility assessment efficiently over multiple centers. So when you want to do a multi-center clinical research. Currently, what is happening is that the person who wants to do, or the organization who wants to do clinical research, they will contact individually each and every center to ask for feasibility information. How many patients you have with these inclusion and exclusion criteria, what kind of data, what kind of things you have available. This is typically done for industry, so industry sponsors or clinical research organizations who are aiming to bring new pharmaceuticals to the market, or investigator-initiated studies, so academic investigators or academic sponsors who are generating evidence typically on safety and efficacy of pediatric pharmaceutical products for academic purposes and clinical decision making. And many of our hospitals have clinical trials units that serve these stakeholders. In pediatric health data space, we can bridge a gap which is currently in this context by providing efficiently an early stage feedback for study protocol design, especially on optimizing how the inclusion and exclusion criteria could be defined so that there is enough patients available for the study. This is super important because if the study protocol is fixed and approved already, you cannot change easily, or you can change, but every single round of change causes time and money. But if there is early feedback that with these modifications you can get enough data from enough subjects, it might be really worth real time and money for the sponsor, be it industry or an academic one. And then there's also very practical how prepared different sites are on doing these trials through a federated approach. So not by trying to address every single one individually, but through a single point of entry, a wider network of hospitals can be reached. Okay, then the third is on observational research, and here is very little that our project is in fact doing new. We are fully relying on the Odyssey type of approach, so observational health data science and informatics, a global community of health data scientists that have not only they are maintaining the OMOP common data model, but there's also tools, open source tools that are available for building cohorts and study design and also doing analytical work. And then there's a very vibrant community who is working on these topics. So I will in fact just guide you through to look at what is Odyssey doing in federated analytics, and there is huge amounts of resources, trainings, and all that available through the Odyssey community. Typically, these studies are of three different types. One is characterization studies, relatively simple. The ask is that what kind of patient population we have, what kind of treatments they are having, what is their characteristics, age distribution, body metrics, and so on. Relatively simple studies can be done relatively efficiently. Then there are two other types of studies: population level estimates, trying to assess the causal relationships between interventions and outcomes, and then some sort of patient level prediction. So tapping onto a larger population data to predict whether a certain type of therapy or certain type of treatment will benefit this type of individual patient based on his or her characteristics. And as said, so there is a very wide community and set of open source tools, tutorials, and others to use the Odyssey common data model and the analytical tool. So I will just, in fact, guide you to familiarize with those if you are interested. Then very briefly on the final topic, which is on the development and validation of artificial intelligence and machine learning models. So this is in particular where we have this small numbers challenge, because AI and machine learning models, they require quite a lot of data to be somehow reliable. It's also important that these are trained and validated with sufficient diversity of environments, so hospitals, clinical environments, demographics, and device data, to ensure that they work also in real-world environments. The goal of this is really to ensure that there is no bias in the algorithms. They produce models that are more broadly applicable than only in the place where they have been developed, and also that they provide equity. So different types of patient groups can benefit from these algorithms when used in their treatment. If looking at how these models are currently being trained and validated, there is of course the way of doing it locally. Each and every center does it locally only by themselves, but this does not add the global sort of model performance. Somehow, if you have a possibility to centralize, so bring a lot of data together and a lot of model parameters together, you can develop it. But then there is the option of federated learning, where the data stays at the edge and only model parameters are being circulated and shared, which again can be seen as a privacy enhancing option for AI model development. There are certain steps that we can go through and have to go through in order to go through a federated AI machine learning development process, and this often becomes iterative in the end, so it has to be done many times. But this is something that is under development also in our setting, and I think that future this will be a very important part of activities done in the pediatric health data space, but at the moment it is still its early phases. Just one remark on phase 2, the use case definition, variable selection, and feasibility. We had just yesterday one of our PHEMS project meetups where the team from Barcelona Sant Joan de Déu Hospital was explaining the process of developing the PICU sepsis algorithm. And their message was that the most difficult part was the clinical definition of this problem, what we're trying to solve. When that one is agreed upon, in fact, the technical part and the algorithms are not anymore the difficult part, but really focus on the clinical and the multidisciplinary assessment of what does the use case actually mean, what data is needed, how can it be retrieved, and how reliable are the results. So I think we are almost out of time, Patricia, but I will just say 2 words about European health data space. Regulation that is in force in Europe and is gradually coming into implementation. It contains 3 areas. It addresses primary use, so for delivery of healthcare cross-border. It contains rules for secondary use, so the use of data for research and public interest purposes. And then it includes requirements for electronic health record vendors. And secondary use, or PHDS 2, is the one that we are mostly interested in when we talk about research and innovation and data access. In PHDS, the user journey is described as stepwise, including data discovery, data access application, preparation, provision, and data use, and results output. And this is really a model for a centralized data processing. So European health data space will bring new opportunities for centralized processing of data, which has the advantages, but maybe also the disadvantages, as we were discussing before, of a centralized approach. What is then the message from PHDS to Federated Analytics? It is really that PHDS will not maybe solve this part, but fortunately PHDS is regulation that is non-exclusive, meaning that if there is other legal way of processing and using patient data for permitted purposes, so this is okay. If it has a framework already in use, in secondary use, they can continue to exist. So my message here is that federated analytics will be possible also, and it in fact can be quite nicely aligned with the European health data space, because these two approaches, federated and centralized approach, they can really complement each other. We are running in FEMS project monthly meetups, so like i4Kids, so every third Tuesday afternoon of the month, we are hosting a meetup. Yesterday I said we have this prediction of sepsis in the PICU setting, will be made available on our YouTube channel. On May we will have a business oriented discussion how to go into the long-term sustainability of the PHDS, and then I will be discussing presenting the FEMS playbook, a map how to build successfully data spaces. And with this I will conclude my presentation, welcoming you again to Helsinki in September. So thank you very much, and sorry for being a bit on the long side, but hopefully this was interesting. I don't know if we have still time for some Q&A or discussion. Patricia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Pekka. It's nice to see that I have started the same way that you are finishing. It's just with a big invitation to everybody to join us in Helsinki, because we're also planning just to have some panel and some discussion about what we have already talked about today. So yes, of course, we have some minutes left if somebody from the audience has a question.
We have one in the chat.
Great. So given the focus on federated data, how do you ensure that difference in consent assent comprehension across sites don't introduce systematic bias into the cohorts being analyzed? Pekka.
I think that this is a question that is similar to centralized and federated approaches. If there is a source of bias, for example, patients forbidding their data use. So this is a topic which is difficult to handle, but I think that there is no other option than to respect the rights of patients, taking this into consideration. Then what we can do is, of course, that the federated analysis provides some sort of quality metrics or metrics that are there certain patients or patient groups that are excluded from the material. But I think this is a very generic question, and it's not, according to my understanding, very specific for federated analytics. It's for any type of data analytics. If you have certain patients that are not there, it can introduce a bias. I don't know if I answered your question, Ina. If you wanna still chime in, please.
Yes, I'm more on the behavioral data because we are not collecting behavioral data, what actually patients comprehend when it's age stratified. So I'm just wondering if you have any framework across your sites, how you standardize this project. The
framework which we're using, so we are building on the electronic health record data. So it's something that is recorded in the health records, and often it's very much based on the coding and structured information around diagnosis procedures, medication, laboratories. As soon as there is like more standardized and structured information, that those can be included in the analytics, but it's the challenge is that the standards are maybe not there yet in all of these areas. But for the medical record, the standards are there, and we can start using them, which is a really powerful tool. If we get standardized also in these other domains, this would make things easier for federated analytics as well.
Thank you. That's exactly my question. If you have already anything standardized, say preparation workflows, visit explainers, informed consent that could be integrated into your MER. So the question is exactly that, if you have already this vision or if it's any work has started.
I think we have a shared vision, but it's also a shared need. Harmonization must sort of proceed, and we have to continuously work with the sort of idea that standards are important. They are maybe a little bit, cause work to implement them, but if we don't have standards, we cannot analyze our data.
Thank you, Kahri. Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you. We also have another question on the chat. It's talking about the needs, the systems and infrastructure that each hospital will need to train large AI models. So do you foresee the use of cloud-based infrastructure for data storage, Pekka, and training of the models?
I think that of course, if we go into very compute intensive applications, so some sort of scalable compute environments are needed. However, many of the things that we are talking here, they might not need too much computational power, especially if we talk about medical, again, data that is in the medical records. That's not like big data in the sense that you would have like imaging or continuous signals, but it's typically tabular or structured data. So often the compute requirements are not as huge as you could imagine in some really demanding model development. But it's clear that if we go into a very demanding and let's say large models, this also the question of storage and compute become very relevant. But it is the infrastructure is such and the design is such that we can do it basically with relatively low performance and also on-premise type of approach. The idea is based that we use these microservices or Kubernetes and containerized applications which standardize then the logistics, and these work well both in cloud and non-cloud environments.
So yes, we don't have any other question. We are on time. So Pekka, I don't know if you'd like to add anything else just before closing this training capsule.
So I think I've been talking a lot already, so thanks again for the opportunity to talk about our project, and I think it's an exciting topic, and hope to see you in IFR Kids or in PHEMS webinars or in Helsinki.
Thank you very much to you, Pekka, for this interesting session, and of course to everybody who has already joined us today. And just stay tuned for more activities that we will be leading from IFR Kids and PHEMS and IFR Kids Europe and all the projects that we are already working on. So thank you very much to everybody, and see you soon. Bye.